let's talk about all of this to Andreas Krieg, who's an associate professor at the School of Security Studies at King's College London. He joins us from London. Andreas, thank you for being with us. I guess you heard what President Trump was saying there. What did you make of it? And what's your sense of which way this is headed? Are we inching towards direct U.S. strikes? Or from what we heard from the president there, is it going to take a little bit of time for him to make up his mind?
Well, I'm a little bit more optimistic than I was 2 days ago when his narrative, his words were extremely harsh. And, this press conference seemed to be a lot more relaxed. He's kind of doubling down on some of it, but also walking back some of the other stuff. The problem with Donald Trump is, and I think, going back to the statement that he made a year ago or so, he said he's a very stable genius. I don't think he is very stable in that way. And his communication strategy is very complicated. I mean, he's not someone who makes clearly calculated moves. It's someone who, at times throws up the entire chessboard in the air and sees how things land, keeping everyone, including the Israelis, but also obviously Gulf partners who are trying to mediate at the moment, in somewhat of a limbo. And that it makes it very difficult to predict which way it's going to go. What he said now was quite clear, that he said, he's open to every pathway. The red line is no nuclear Iran. From all the intelligence reports we have, we don't think that Iran is anywhere near a nuclear weaponization of the nuclear program. The question is just how you're going to achieve that end.
Sorry to interrupt you. He did say during those comments there that he thought Iran was a few weeks away from having a nuclear weapon. Where would he get that information from?
I think this is very much the Israeli talking point. What is important to understand here is the Trump administration is based on a single individual, Donald Trump. He's surrounded by a lot of advisors, but really it's a one-man show. And the Israelis have been working on him quite extensively for the last couple of days, trying to feed him information and narratives. And I would say this entire idea of there being a secretive intelligence report that the U.S. intelligence community, the U.K. intelligence, or the Five Eyes intelligence community doesn't have, I think is a false narrative. I don't think there is actually tangible evidence to suggest that Iran is days away. But he's repeating talking points. And the problem with Donald Trump is he owns talking points, even though he doesn't necessarily know if they're true or not. But, he goes with it and he doubles down. And that's obviously the danger of all of it. And I think he isn't really, he's not really aware of the power of words of a sitting president in all of that. But he wants this to end. So I think still, obviously preparations are being made for a military escalation that would see the full military destruction of the nuclear program inside Iran. That's something Israel cannot achieve on its own, and the United States will have to help with that. But I think it's also still a coercive lever in the hope that the Iranians will come to the negotiation table. All the discussions the Qataris and the Omanis had today suggest the Iranians will not accept a dictate, particularly not when it comes under fire.
If the U.S. were to help, as you say, Andreas, what would that help look like? There's been a lot of talk about the U.S. B-2 bombers, talk about the bunker-busting bombs that only the Americans have that could strike the Fordow nuclear facility deep underground. What would a direct route of U.S. involvement in this war look like? And can any U.S. operation be limited, do you think?
I think the Israeli campaign already is not limited. I think we're in an entirely new phase of escalation that we haven't seen in the Middle East since 2003. So everything is possible. Any involvement of the United States beyond the support they're giving now, which is logistical and intelligence, is a major escalation. There is no such thing as a limited operation, and the Iranians will have to respond, and they will respond to it. Hence why these flights, so what we're suggesting now, or what the Americans are suggesting, is that these bunker buster bombs, these 30,000-pound bombs, will be delivered by, and they can only be delivered by B-2 bombers. B-2 bombers that can actually fly quite a long distance. They could fly from bases in Europe. They could fly from Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, and could be delivered on target, particularly when we're talking about Fordow, which is 60 or more meters underground. But even that will not guarantee that the facilities that are so deep in the mountain will eventually be destroyed, certainly not with a singular bomb. So it might need a couple of sorties. I don't think that this is something the Iranians will just swallow and say, okay, that's it, we're not going to retaliate. Right. Iran will have to retaliate. The question is just how.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that because what we've seen in the last 24 hours or so, and what we've heard from our correspondent earlier, is that there's been a notable de-escalation in Iranian attacks on Israel over the past day or so. Does that suggest to you a tactical pause from Iran, or are they recalibrating? And if they do respond to the U.S. involvement, what will that look like, you think?
I mean, the Iranians have a range of different missiles, quite a lot of missiles, but they don't have that many missiles that can hit Israel. So I think they are trying to get, they know the Israelis can keep the operational tempo up. So the Iranians have to find some way to keep operational tempo up to retaliate in due course and in proportionate ways to Israeli attacks. That also means they can't deplete their missiles that quickly or as quickly as they might have done in the first day. So I think they're holding back. I also think they're running out of missiles that can hit Israel over time. So I think they can't afford to shoot more than 10, 20 missiles per day, while the Israelis obviously can strike with impunity for an indefinite period of time inside Iran. But that being said, the Iranians do have short and mid-range missiles that can hit, for example, the Gulf. They could hit Gulf bases, U.S. bases in the Gulf as a mean of retaliation, which is very different from striking all the way in Israel.
Let me ask you now about the Israeli strategy and what they've been doing these past 6 days now. They've not just hit nuclear sites in Iran. They've targeted military infrastructure, energy infrastructure. It's also the state security building, the state TV building we saw earlier this week, the Red Cross in the last 24 hours. What does that tell you about where the Israelis want to take this war? And are you seeing any patterns that are similar from their operations in Gaza, for example, or Lebanon re-emerging here?
Very different from Gaza, obviously, very different war. And we also see the Israelis can be quite relatively proportionate in the way they apply force, unlike in Gaza, where they just carpet bomb. But it's very similar to what we've seen in Lebanon, which is degradation, where through slow degradation, they're trying to take out and disintegrate the strategic leadership of the organization, of the system, in this case, the Islamic Republic, most importantly, the IRGC. They obviously have so far stayed away from the Ayatollah and some of the religious leaders. But obviously, there's been a target list where allegedly, according to the Israelis, Khamenei was on as well. So that degradation leads to internal instability. It leads to paralysis. It means command and control systems are being disrupted. The Iranians find it very difficult to communicate because they know once they do, they might become a target immediately. They don't have effective air defenses. So it's very similar to what we've seen in Lebanon, where Hezbollah hasn't been entirely defeated, but paralyzed internally so much that they are not an immediate threat. The problem with Iran is it's obviously a state, it's a country. If you're trying to hollow out the regime, you run the risk, obviously, that over time, the regime might not fully collapse, but is unable to actually fully operate. And that would be in Israel's interest, to completely undermine the ability of Iran to actually act as a country, undermining their means of statecraft and their means of foreign and security policy and their decision-making, and leaving it weak and forcing it to a negotiation table as a weak country.